In the summer of 2008, America became fixated on a story that seemed stranger than fiction. A young mother in Orlando, Florida, was accused of murdering her 2-year-old daughter. What followed was one of the most notorious trials in American history, a case that exposed family dysfunction, captivated the media, and ended with a verdict that shocked the nation. The Casey Anthony trial was not only about the tragic death of Caylee Anthony, but also about lies, deception, and the failure of the justice system to deliver answers. The story begins on July 15, 2008. Cindy Anthony dialed 911 in a panic, reporting that her granddaughter, Caylee Marie Anthony, had been missing for 31 days. The revelation stunned the dispatcher. Why had it taken so long for anyone to call the police? Cindy explained that her daughter, Casey Anthony, had insisted Caylee was with a nanny named Zani. But that night, Cindy had tracked down her daughter's abandoned car and noticed a foul odor coming from the trunk. To Cindy, it smelled like death. From the very beginning, the case seemed bizarre. Casey Anthony was 22 years old, a single mother who lived with her parents, George and Cindy Anthony. She often partied with friends, went clubbing, and posted photos of herself smiling and carefree. But behind the pictures was a web of lies. Investigators quickly discovered that Casey had not been working, despite telling her family she had a job at Universal Studios. The so-called nanny, Zani, or Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez, did not exist. For a month, Casey had lied to her parents, her friends, and the police about Caylee's whereabouts. When detectives pressed Casey, her stories unraveled. She led them on a bizarre tour of Universal Studios, pretending she worked there, only to eventually admit that she didn't. She invented friends and coworkers who didn't exist. Her fabrications painted a picture of a young woman willing to say anything to cover up the truth. The question was, what truth was she hiding? As the investigation intensified, suspicion grew that Caylee was not simply missing, but dead. Forensic experts examined Casey's abandoned car. Inside the trunk, they detected traces of chloroform, a chemical sometimes used to knock someone unconscious. They also found hair consistent with Caylee's, showing signs of decomposition. To investigators, the evidence suggested that Caylee's body had once been inside the trunk. But without a body, the case remained circumstantial. That changed in December 2008, when Caylee's skeletal remains were discovered in a wooded area less than a mile from the Anthony home. The remains were inside a trash bag, with duct tape found near the skull. The discovery confirmed what many had feared: Caylee was dead. But how she died remained unclear. Prosecutors charged Casey Anthony with first-degree murder, seeking the death penalty. They argued that Casey had killed her daughter to free herself from the responsibilities of motherhood. Their case centered on the theory that Casey used chloroform to incapacitate Caylee and then suffocated her with duct tape before disposing of the body. They presented Casey as a liar who spent the 31 days after her daughter's disappearance partying, entering hot body contests, and living without a care in the world. To the prosecution, Casey was selfish, deceitful, and capable of murder. The defense, led by attorney Jose Baez, painted a very different picture. In his opening statement, Baez shocked the courtroom by claiming that Caylee's death had been an accident, not a murder. He argued that Caylee had drowned in the family pool and that Casey's father, George Anthony, had helped cover it up. Baez also alleged that Casey had been sexually abused by George, suggesting that her pattern of lying stemmed from years of trauma. These claims were explosive, but they were not supported by physical evidence. Still, they planted seeds of doubt in the jury's mind. The trial began in May 2011 and quickly became a media spectacle. Cameras broadcast every moment. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse, some holding signs demanding justice for Caylee, others defending Casey. Talk shows, news programs, and tabloids dissected every piece of testimony. It was called the trial of the century, and it divided public opinion like few cases before it. Witnesses testified about Casey's behavior during the 31 days Caylee was missing. Friends recalled how Casey never mentioned that her daughter was gone. She went out dancing, got a tattoo that read Bella Vita, Italian for beautiful life, and acted as if nothing was wrong. To the prosecution, This was proof of a guilty conscience. To the defense, it was the behavior of a young woman in denial, dealing with trauma in destructive ways. Forensic evidence played a central role. Experts testified that searches on the Anthony family computer included terms like chloroform, neck breaking, and how to make chloroform. Prosecutors argued that Casey had researched methods to kill her daughter, but the defense countered that the searches could not be definitively linked to Casey and that other family members had access to the computer. The discovery of Kaylee's remains was also heavily debated. The duct tape found near the skull became a key point for the prosecution, who argued it had been used to suffocate the child. But the defense claimed the duct tape was not conclusively linked to Kaylee's death, and that there was no clear evidence proving homicide. Perhaps the most dramatic moments came when Casey's parents testified. Cindy Anthony broke down on the stand, torn between grief for her granddaughter and loyalty to her daughter. George Anthony denied the allegations of sexual abuse and insisted he had nothing to do with Kaylee's death. The family was fractured, their private struggles laid bare for the world to see. As the trial stretched into weeks, the nation watched with bated breath. The prosecution delivered a powerful closing argument, calling Casey a liar whose selfishness had led to her daughter's death. They reminded the jury of the smell in the car trunk, the internet searches, and Casey's month of partying. Whose life was beautiful? The prosecutor asked, referencing Casey's tattoo. Kaylee's life was not beautiful. Casey's was. The defense countered by hammering the lack of concrete evidence. There were no eyewitnesses, no cause of death determined by the medical examiner, and no direct proof tying Casey to Kaylee's death. Jose Baez told the jury, "If you're going to charge someone with murder, you better have more than suspicion. You better have evidence." On July 5, 2011, the jury delivered its verdict. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, and aggravated manslaughter of a child. She was convicted only of 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to law enforcement. The decision shocked the courtroom, stunned the nation, and sparked outrage. Many believe the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to Casey's guilt, and the verdict was seen as a failure of justice for Kaylee. Casey was sentenced to time served for the misdemeanors and was released shortly after. Outside the courthouse, angry crowds chanted, "Justice for Kaylee." Legal analysts debated how the jury could acquit, with some pointing to the prosecution's failure to establish a clear cause of death and others arguing that the defense had successfully raised reasonable doubt. The aftermath of the trial was explosive. Casey Anthony became one of the most hated figures in America, vilified in the media and public opinion. She went into hiding for years, rarely appearing in public. Meanwhile, Kaylee's memory was honored through new legislation. Kaylee's Law was introduced in several states, making it a felony for parents to fail to report a missing child in a timely manner. The trial also raised questions about the role of media in shaping public perception. For 3 years, Casey Anthony was portrayed as guilty in the court of public opinion, long before the jury rendered its verdict. The saturation of coverage made it nearly impossible to separate fact from speculation. The case became a spectacle where entertainment and tragedy blurred together. Today, more than a decade later, the Casey Anthony trial remains a defining moment in American legal history. It is remembered not only for the tragic death of Kaylee Anthony, but also for the way it exposed the flaws of the justice system, the power of reasonable doubt, and the dangerous influence of media-driven narratives. For many, justice was never served. The truth of what happened to Kaylee may never be fully known. But her short life changed laws, changed families, and left a permanent mark on the nation. At its core, the case is a reminder that trials are not about what the public believes, but about what can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Whether Casey Anthony was guilty or innocent may forever remain in question. But the legacy of the trial endures, haunting those who followed it and reminding us that sometimes justice and truth are not the same.